Hi everyone, welcome to the 2021 Deborah Cass Prize for Writing Awards. Great to see you all here tonight. My name is James Button. I'm the host of tonight. I'm a freelance writer. I'm a former member of the Deborah Cass Prize Committee and a very old friend of Deborah Cass and her family. I'm speaking to you today from Melbourne, or Naarm, which is on the land of the Wurundjeri people, the Kulin Nation. I acknowledge the Wurundjeri people and I pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging, for they hold the memories, the traditions, the culture and the hopes of Aboriginal Australians. The land under the concrete and asphalt, the gardens, the train lines, the fences and our footprints should always be recognised as Aboriginal land. Now, people tonight will be coming from all over Australia, so you'll be coming from Aboriginal lands in different places, and we welcome you all here this evening. I'm just going to say a bit about how the night will go, and then hand over to Dan Cass, Deborah's brother, who will talk a bit about the prize and about Deborah. So tonight is the 7th year of the Deborah Cass Prize for Writing. We've got a great lineup for you. So make sure you wait till the end when we award the prize winner and the 2 runners-up. We will also hear from our special guest speaker, Sisonke Simang from Perth, who's speaking to us live. We're very privileged to have Sisonke come and speak to us, and I'll introduce her later on. And we will also present a brief slideshow to introduce the 7 shortlisted candidates, and then we'll cross to Melbourne writer Melanie Cheng, and Melanie will, who's one of this year's judges and herself a very distinguished alumni of the prize, and Mel will speak about the winning entries and announce the 2 runners-up and the winner. It's really interesting. This year, 4 of our previous winners or runners-up have actually had books published. And this follows quite a long tradition of books of being published in different ways from winners and runners-up of the Deborah Cass Prize. In the past, Melanie Cheng, Jessie Tu, Moreno Giovannoni are in that category. And in the past year, we've had Emily Sun, who was a runner-up in 2018, whose collection of poems, Vociferate, has been published. Monika Reshevsky, shortlisted in 2016. Her novel, Archaeology of a Dream City, has been published. Edita Mojcik, also a runner-up in 2016. Her short story, Reset, was published this year in the Sydney Hammond Competition Anthology. And Sume Tan, who was a runner-up with Emily Sun in 2018, her collection of stories, Lake Malibu, is about to be published. And I've actually started reading them and they are terrific. So we're really excited. One of the things that we who have been involved in this prize for a long time love about it is this is not just about a prize. There is a whole bunch of events that happen around the prize. There is the introduction to a publisher. There is the mentorship program that we have. And there is the community of writers that's been established by this prize. People who have just, various people have been shortlisted and involved who have just made connections with each other and built online networks and support for their writing. And we're really excited about that because we feel like we've started something quite special with the prize, and we really value all of your support. So welcome tonight. And now I'm going to hand over to Deborah's brother, Dan. Over to you, Dan.
Thanks so much, James, for the lovely words, as always. So good evening. And like James, I acknowledge this is Aboriginal land in Naarm, the country of the Wurundjeri people, the Kulin Nation, which was sovereignty was never ceded, and I pay my respects to elders past and present. And I have to say, I do miss meeting in person and having dinner after the award night and having a drink with the writers and the aspiring writers and our community. But it is wonderful looking at the little ticker on the side of the Zoom window that shows people clicking in and joining us from around the country and around the world. So that's lovely, thinking that we're spreading our wings in this virtual pandemic life. Deborah, my sister, died in 2013 from cancer, and she was becoming a writer when she did. She'd been a brilliant radical lawyer. She always loved writing. In fact, she edited Farrago with James at Melbourne Uni when they were undergrads. She liked editing stories always, but she was driven to change the world and did that through the law, studied at Harvard, taught in Australia and at the London School of Economics. But when she was facing the end of her life, she turned from wanting to change the world to writing about it, telling a story. And after Deborah passed away, it was our mother, Shirley Cass, who suggested that we should try to honour Deborah with a prize in her name for aspiring writers from migrant backgrounds, recognising that our family on both sides had been migrants who came to this country and settled and have had wonderful lives here for many years. So the prize was launched in 2015 with James and others on the committee. Friends and family of Deborah have supported the prize ever since. And the purpose of the prize is to help increase the diversity of Australian literature by helping aspiring writers from a migrant background tell their stories and get into print. And this is not necessarily stories about the migration experience as such, but stories from it that somehow carry the sensibility of people who've had this incredibly important experience that really has shaped our country so profoundly. The winner receives $3,000 and then a mentorship to complete their manuscript, and finally an introduction to Black Ink, who read the manuscript. The two runners-up get $500. And as James said, the thing that's been so gratifying and exciting this year was 4 of the writers who had been runners-up or shortlistees had their works published this year, or one will be published soon. And, you know, this was really unexpected and wonderful for all of us, I think, to see as the prize matured, that it wasn't just about the winner each year, and we put a great effort into finding a wonderful winner each year, but also seeing that the other writers receive some kind of boost and shot in the arm from being selected by our incredible judging panel and being given recognition as the 2 runners-up or the slightly larger shortlist cohort. And I think my sister Deborah would have found this really inspiring and democratic, that the purpose and the impact of the prize is not just finding a wonderful winner each year, but also building this community year after year that keeps growing. So thank you, writers, for entering yet again. Very much looking forward to seeing who wins this year. Thank you most of all to supporters for your time or your money. We couldn't do it without you. Thank you there, the wonderful esteemed judges, Melanie Cheng, Lee Kaufman and Sisonke Nisimang, who again have given your great names and precious time and literary expertise to our prize. Thank you, Carolyn Jordan, for lots of wrangling, Helen Stitt for lots of wrangling of judging and shortlisting and longlisting, and James for the emceeing, Writers Victoria for hosting the prize, Mascara Literary Review, a key publishing partner, and of course Black Ink. So more than enough from me. Let's press on and hear from incredible writer and activist Sisonke and find out who won the 2021 Deborah Cass Prize. Thanks, James.
It's my great pleasure to introduce Sisonke Nisimang to us this evening. I don't know where to start with introducing Sisonke. There is so much to say about her life, the life that she's lived so far at a very young age, but I'll just say a few things. She's really an activist and a writer-activist, if you like, as from what I can see. She has done so much. She's worked with UNAIDS to forge HIV/AIDS policies relating to African women and girls. She was executive director of the Open Society Initiative for Southern Africa, and she was also involved with the Sonke Gender Justice Network. And I think she's still involved there, working with men and boys to promote gender equality. She's been both a storyteller and a facilitator for the Moth and TED events, and she's participated in several Doha debates. She's been living in Perth since 2018, and in 2020, she was the Literature and Ideas curator for Perth Writers' Week. And it's really as a writer that I think we need to recognise Sisonke. Her story is extraordinary. She is the daughter of a South African freedom fighter, and she grew up outside of South Africa, in Zambia. She's a migrant herself in so many ways. She's lived in Zambia, Kenya, South Africa, Canada, US, and now in Australia. And it's really interesting hearing reading Sazonke write about migration. She said at one point, so many of us define ourselves by place because it's the place that holds our memories. In my case, the people hold the memories because we were gone and then we were gone again. She's the author of 2 books. One is Always Another Country, a memoir of exile and home, and The Resurrection of Winnie Mandela, a biography of the South African activist and wife of Nelson Mandela. And her work is focused on race, gender, and democracy. And Sazonke, I have to say, when I started reading an extract from The Resurrection of Winnie Mandela in the Sydney Morning Herald, I wanted to read more. It was just so gripping. And, you know, you write so powerfully and so with such economy. And she starts her book, her memoir, My Sisters and I Are Freedom's Children, born into the African National Congress and nurtured within a revolutionary community whose sole purpose is to fight apartheid. It's such a powerful start. We're thrilled to have you here tonight, thrilled to have you involved with the Deborah Cass Prize, and I'd ask you to speak to us. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, James. Thank you in particular for saying that I'm still young. I really appreciate it. And apologies for the lighting failure that I'm having. It's 4 p.m. here in Borlu in Perth. I join you from Nungabuja, and I'm delighted to speak to everybody today. So thank you for inviting me. It is such an honor and a pleasure to be a judge on the Deborah Cass Prize for many reasons, not least of all that I get to hang out with virtually Melanie Chang and Lee Kaufman, who are brilliant and funny and juggling many things at the same time with absolute aplomb. So I have prepared some remarks today, and I'm going to read. And my thoughts are around writing and the place of writing at this time. And I've titled it On Writing in Unstable Times. I would have liked to meet Deborah. Her energy sings out through her words, the humor, the vitality, the careful observation, the love. As her husband Jerry said in the closing comments in a book about legal scholarship, which I will not pretend to have read, but I certainly read the preface and the end bits that was made in honor of her life's work. Jerry said, and I quote, "Deborah and her work have had such powerful afterlives." And so, of course, this prize is just one of those many afterlives, and how it lives. In the same book in which Jerry made his comments about Deborah and her afterlives, her brother Dan, who you've just heard from, wrote of this prize being founded on the principle that, quote, "literature is an antidote to bigotry." And in many ways, I think that's why Melanie and Lee and myself are so committed to this prize. So as I thought about what to say today to a screen full of people who care about the world and the connections between us, those who occupy this world, I immediately turned to James Baldwin. His words on writing and reading are the ones I turn to most often. He was one of the most marvelous chroniclers of the human condition. And in an essay that appeared in Time magazine in 1963, Baldwin, which was 5 months before the March on Washington, it was 2 years before Malcolm X was killed and 5 years before the assassination of Martin Luther King, Baldwin wrote, "You think that your pain and your heartbreak are unprecedented in the history of the world, but then you read. It was books that taught me that the things that tormented me most were the very things that connected me with people, with all the people who were alive and who had ever been alive." End quote. And so I'm honored to be connected in some small way, in this Baldwin-esque way, to an award that seeks to enlarge the place of literature and language in the world, and by that token, to diminish the specter of bigotry. I've been thinking a lot about what it means to write in these unstable and frightening times, to shut oneself off from the noise and the speed of the world, and to find or to make time to be alone, to be with your thoughts. It is hard work, It is glorious work, certainly, but difficult given the demands of capitalism and given the increasingly strong pull of new forms of media and socializing. Many of these forms of communicating are hard to escape because they are designed to draw us in. They're polarizing and therefore addictive. There is always fresh blood, always a fight to join, an enemy to make. Opposition as sport, acrimony as a badge of honor. And so to return to Baldwin, I admit that I often think about this idea of writing as a way of connecting to other people feels sometimes as though it belongs to another era. Writing today is so often weaponized, so often turned into a way of stopping connection, of bolstering our convictions. We no longer have right and left. We increasingly just have right and wrong. I am right and you are wrong. And yet, of course, as she wrote about international law in the early 2000s, Deborah wrote that she sought to, quote, enable both sides to explore each other's territory. This is such an apt description of what the best kind of writing does. It enables us to explore one another's territory. It allows us to understand that our heartbreak is not unprecedented, that it is in fact ordinary and mundane, and so it is deeply human. And there has never been a time in recent history when the shape of our heartbreak has been so startlingly similar across time and place. There are, of course, inequalities to be sure, but the coronavirus has reminded us that we have not conquered nature, and that above all, human touch, closeness, not social distancing, remains a fundamental part of who we are as humans. The virus also reminds us that of the fundamental instability of the world. And in this way, perhaps we're living in a time that even for Baldwin might have been challenging. In an essay on creative writing, Baldwin wrote that, quote, a society must assume that it is stable, but the artist must know, and he must let us know, that there is nothing unstable under heaven. There is no one, of course, living today who is under any illusions about the stability of the world. We are living in incredibly unstable times. As the climate talks in Glasgow last week reminded us, we are faced with an existential crisis of our own making, and our ability to keep rising temperatures in check and our capacity to do so for the sake of our collective futures is in fact in doubt. There is indeed nothing stable under heaven right now. And so the question with which we are all faced, the question that Baldwin doesn't ask, but that is implied, is what the artist must do when a society assumes that it is not stable, when in fact it is grappling with near certain death, when it is actively falling apart. What is the writer to do in this circumstance? In the places where coronavirus has hit hardest, in places where there have been bushfires and floods, where racism continues to stalk Black people who are gunned down and harassed or neglected to death in custody, in societies where the poor greet each morning with hunger, writers confront these questions every day. What is a writer to do in unstable times? In South Africa, where my family still lives and where a large part of my heart still exists, my generation has taken a huge hit. In a country whose economic base is as fragile as South Africa's, my generation is overly important, I like to say. We are the caretakers. We are the breadwinners. We provide school fees to many families, and we pay for groceries across households. It is our counsel that is sought in disputes because the old ones die far too young in places where there's so much poverty. And so as we head into our third year of this pandemic, there are cousins and peers who I have not seen and who I will never see again because of the toll of the coronavirus. And the work of chronicling their lives, of thinking about who we are and how we might be without the dead, that work of holding a mirror up and forcing us to look or helping us to look away when we need to, that is the work of writers. Whether we are writing about the coronavirus or not, and interestingly, and frankly, thankfully, none of our writers this year did. Our art, our words, are a testament to the human spirit, to our capacity to imagine different worlds. And in this capacity above all, this capacity to imagine different worlds is what will either sink or save us as humanity. And so today we are here to celebrate the words of a group of writers whose understanding of the human condition was evident from the first words that we read. As judges, we were thrilled to receive such a wide-ranging and beautiful collection of stories. There was humor and there was pain, but above all, there was specificity. Some people call this authenticity, some people call it voice. There were these small idiosyncrasies in every story that made it clear that no one else could have dreamed up these characters, or in the case of the creative nonfiction, described the world in such new and fresh ways. All of the writers this year have succeeded in telling stories that will live on, regardless of what happens to the rest of us. Writing about the physics of Blackness, the academic Michelle Wright talks about how space-time, and she talks about space-time and the weight of the now. She describes the now as being a different register to the present. In the now, all other time is also with us. All other time also surrounds us. In the now, history is present and can be touched. And there is a way of writing that seeks to express now time. This is the mode of those of us who are new to a place often operate out of necessity. We live, of course, in the moment, but we are fully conscious of history. It sits with us. And so the key to writing in unstable times, I think, is to insist on living in this now time, in being present with history. The key to writing in unstable times, I think, is to insist on using words not as weapons, but in using words as guides, to explore one another's territory, to quote Deborah, not in a sentimental, mealy-mouth way of both sidesism that leads to confusion and inertia, but in a way that pushes past vitriol and that seeks what is most vulnerable. Writing takes courage, but as my friend Pumla Ola writes, it does not require fearlessness. If anything, writing into and through and with fear lies at the heart of our most important work. All of the stories that we read this year as judges contained wondrous elements of fear and fearlessness. To have and to hold fear is part of the human condition, and to examine that fear, to respect it, to celebrate it, to be curious about it, to ask, to use an example of the moment, to ask the anti-vaxxer, so what are you afraid of? To ask the other whom we fear, what is it that you fear? That, I think, is the work of the writer. This prize, and those brave enough to enter it, stands for everything that is best about being human. If we are going to survive these unstable times, and I am hopeful that we will, it will be because we are prepared to do what Deborah Cass asked us to do, which is to explore one another's territory. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you, Sisanke, for a wonderful description of why writing matters. And I was just struck by your starting with James Baldwin and going to Michelle Wright, just the now time. I think both of those writers would have seen that as such an important aspect of writing, about writing to the conditions you face, that we all face right now. It was such a powerful description, and so great to have you on the judging, because you have grasped why this prize matters so much to so many of us. I'm going to introduce now Melanie Chen. Mel is has been one of the judges of the prize for a long time. She's a distinguished writer herself. Her first book, Australia Day, won the Victorian Premier's Literary Award for an unpublished manuscript in 2016, and then it won the actual Premier's Literary Award for fiction in 2018. And she's also published Room for a Stranger. But what we really value about Mel, apart from her brilliant writing, is her commitment to this prize over a long time. She was a runner-up in the first year of the prize, and she's been with us ever since. And we're thrilled to have you, Mel. And I'm going to ask you to take us through the shortlisted entrants this year, who they are, and tell us who the runners-up are and who has won. Thank you.
honour and delight to present the judges' report tonight. This is my third year as a judge for the Deborah Cass Prize and my second year judging with Lee and Sisonke. And I can honestly say that as far as judging goes, this prize has been one of the most enjoyable and easy judging experiences I've had, partly because of my two generous, incredibly smart and dedicated fellow judges from whom I've learnt so much, but mostly because of the quality of the entries, the enthusiasm and the raw talent that we get to behold year after year after year. Congratulations to all of you for having the courage to put your words to paper and to release them into the world. It's a scary thing to do, but we are all better for it. The other thing that I love about the Deborah Cass Award is that it's not just a cash prize. It has a mentorship attached to it, something that most emerging and even established writers see as being absolutely priceless. This is a bittersweet year because it will be my last year participating as a judge. We've heard about the successes of our alumni tonight, and I think everyone will appreciate that this is not just an award, but a community that we're building. And even though I will no longer be a judge, I do hope to always be a member of this community. As I leave, I see just how much the prize has grown since its inaugural year in 2015, when I myself was a shortlistee, nervously waiting like you all are, my heart thrashing around in my chest, while some judge, I think it might have been Alice Pung, painfully drew out the proceedings. So without further ado, let's get to the reason we are all here tonight. In third place, we have a story with an extremely enticing premise, told through a slightly old-fashioned and wry voice. The judges said the prose was rich in texture, the characters were compelling, and it was a pleasure to read. It gives me great pleasure to announce that third place goes to The Seconds of Holroyd House by Patrick Arulanamdam. Well, congratulations, Patrick. It was a wonderful story. In second place, we have an excerpt that is evocative, with a powerful sense of place, crafted by a deft and confident storyteller. The judges enjoyed the crispness of the language and the clarity of the author's vision. The judges felt that this was the work of an assured and talented writer. The second place runner-up is Irina Frolova, for her story, On the Tail of the Firebird. Congratulations, Irina. And now to the winner. The judges were all in agreement about the originality and authenticity of the winning story. The judges spoke of the writer's flair with language, and we were in awe of their ability to engage the reader's senses so completely. We loved the nuance in the story, and most importantly, we felt that this piece touched on some of the subtleties of the migrant experience that we hadn't seen represented in the Australian literary scene before. In particular, the push and the pull that exists within a family on the precipice of migration, the bargaining, the negotiation that goes on behind the scenes. There were also some fabulously original images, things like the arrowheads of perspiration on the backs of their uniforms, a fisherman, bird-boned, sun-pruned, cement trucks that crept like great insects with churning abdomens. It gives me great pleasure to announce that the winner of this year's 2021 Deborah Cass Prize is Independencia by Bryant Apollonio. And now I believe we have the great pleasure of hearing Bryant speak and also read a short excerpt from the winning story. Thank you, Bryant.
Thanks, Melanie. Thanks to all the judges and the organising committee for your work on this prize. I wish I could be with you all tonight, but I'm not. I'm in Darwin, speaking to you right now from unceded Larrakia country. And I'm going to read an extract from my short story, Independencia, which is about the eruption of Mount Pinatubo, in the Philippines, which also happened in 1991, which also happened to be the same day as the Independence Day of the country. Araw ng Kalayaan, 1991, the banner read, "It's a holiday, but who'd pick it? There's no joy in the mob's foot drag shuffle. There's no brassy national anthem. Only the heckle of 1,000 waylaid travelers, glassy customer service smiles, apology and regret over the PA." Arturo told his wife he'd go outside and see if he could learn more about what was happening. "Take June with you," Gina had said flatly. He took his son by the hand. "Don't let go, anak." Arturo said as they pried their way through the throng. Queues shoved up against the service counters like a river delta against the coast. Around the concourse, passengers awaited news. They lay on the benches or on the carpet, resting their heads on suitcases and clothes. Jun pulled his father closer to the windows facing the tarmac where the planes stood waiting. He liked watching them inch forward, all chrome and combustion coming to life at once, carbonating the air with pre-ignition fuel, only to be stopped just as suddenly by some off-screen order, a bark from the radio or the flourish of an air marshal's wand. The pair left the airport and emerged on Aquino Avenue, where street vendors had gathered and set up roadside shops. Children, some as young as Jun, made brisk trade as they weaved between stalls. Unruly knockabouts with salesman flair calling out quail eggs, duck eggs, peanuts, while local cops watched on with apprehension. Arturo walked over to where the policemen were standing. He waved an amicable hand. "Can you tell me what's going on here? When will they let us fly?" The men seemed listless. They lacked the rigidity of military, clearly exiled here by some overbearing supervisor. Here, instead of an air-conditioned card hall or Pasai brothel, waiting out the end of the world. "Where are you headed, Pare?" the younger officer asked. His face shone in the heat. "Sydney," Arturo said. He had relatives there who'd schemed for years to get them over. They needed diligent workers, one cousin had promised Toro and his wife. They needed men with brains. He had prophesied food on the table each night and 2 kids in medical school. And Arturo must have had such a slack-wit look on his face because the police officer's exasperation suddenly gave way to pity. "No, Pare," said the older cop, clapping a sympathetic paw on his shoulder. "Where do you live? Where's home? No one's leaving Manila today." They had automatic weapons slung over their shoulders, old Yank M16s seized from the communists, the ordnance you'd expect from a former dictatorship. On the other side of the street, a homeless man was shouting. He held a sign that said Revelations, chapter 8, verse 8. The cops watched for a while, expecting a disturbance, but the man wasn't harassing anybody and most passers-by avoided him. They barely stole a glance, in fact. Doom-struck madmen would be a common enough sight in the city by the end of that summer. The older cop turned back to Arturo. "This is just the first blast, sir. A throat clearing. Things will get worse. Get your family home and stay there." Arturo watched the policemen trudge off, arrowheads of sweat on the back of their uniforms. He stretched his arms up over his head and heard knots of muscle pop, and then he looked down at Jun. Now what? The crowd had grown much larger in the short time they'd been outside. People were leaving the airport and just sort of standing still, reaching the exit and staring up at the northern sky, uncertain about where they were meant to go from there. There were harried-looking businessmen and young people who should have been on holiday. Vivid heaps of luggage rested at their feet. There was a pilot pinching the front of his shirt, a Latin American priest flanked by 2 nuns in the black habit of the Benedictines. They sat on the bench and prayed the rosary. Toro crouched down on one knee so he was eye level with his son. He pointed up at the clouds of ash that advanced like a tired army. "You see that, Jun?" "It's a fire," said the boy. Arturo nodded. "A fire. Right in the middle of the mountain. An enormous fire that started long ago," he went on, as if he were beginning a story. But before he could tell it, Junior had already fashioned his own. A treasure hoard in a deep magma chamber, a scarlet beast with ancient wings outstretched. It was Arturo's quiet pleasure to watch his son when he got like this. The drifty look he got, mouth agape, the mop of black hair over his eyes. And he envied the way the boy, like all children, could relocate himself so easily into a world all his own. "Let's find your mother," Arturo said. The priest and the nuns were reciting the Hail Mary. Arturo wasn't a religious man. He hadn't been to church in years. He believed that truth lay in numbers and in an understanding of the world's physical laws. A mountain was just an accommodation of stress and pressure. A volcano would telegraph its eruption for weeks and weeks if you knew what to listen for. An earthquake in Tangshan could set another one off on the far end of the Eurasian plate. He knew that the land they stood on was temporary, but its coastlines changed shape and its atolls sank into the Pacific, and sometimes they rose. But looking at the Zambales Mountains today, even he found it hard to deny what his countrymen already knew. A Plinian column, 20 kilometers high, obscured by the red palm of sun. Disintegrated pumice and silicon covered the stratosphere like living tissue. It had a terrible life to it, he thought. There was will and there was portent here. And how easy it was today to believe in a God that punished and judged. And how much it looked like two lobes perched on a spindly stem. A great brain looming over the Philippine Islands, solemn and indifferent. Pinatubo. Thanks.
Brian, that is just a brilliant passage. I love the way that your writing moves so fast from the macro, from the coastline and the sky, down to the people there with the luggage at their feet. It's just so vivid and visual. The priests, the people, the chaos, the young people there, older people, everybody affected by this moment. That is such a powerful piece of writing, and I can see why the judges found it so compelling. We're at the end of the Deborah Cass Prize for 2021. It's been a terrific event. Thank you to all the people who have been involved in it, the committee who have worked so hard, Helen and Caroline. I've been off the committee, so I don't have all the names of everybody anymore, but I know that it's been just hard work for a long time. We're a volunteer organisation. We rely on your support, and we hope you'll keep supporting us, because that's the only way we can keep this prize, of which we're so proud, going. I want to thank Sisonke Simang for speaking to us from Perth. Wonderful speech that really set out why writing matters and why this prize, which she's joined as a judge, matters. Melanie Cheng, for your work, Mel, over so many years judging this prize, and for your work in this year too, in your final year. We'll certainly miss you. To the Cass family and to Dan in particular, thank you for all that you've done to get. It's hard getting things like this off the ground, and we keep beating our wings every year to keep it up in the air, and we hope we can keep doing that in future. So, and thank you all for coming, and stay with us, make connections with the people here, and stay on our email list, and we'll see you in 2022. Thank you very much. And also thank you to Writers Victoria and Caitlin, if I can just say that, for their work. Caitlin, for your tech work, and for Writers Victoria for being our partners in this. It's so important. So thank you, everybody. See you next year. Bye-bye.